Good evening, TheoTrade. This is Corey Rosenblum, and you're watching the Theo Nightly video for the 21st of July here still in 2022. Still watching the earnings, mainly from Netflix, Tesla, a few others, mainly the stocks at the top of the list, but there are other stocks that have earnings coming up on Friday, those being American Express, Verizon, and NextEra Energy. But let's start, before we get into our earnings in tonight's video, with the broader market. And these percent change feel a little bit different than what happened in today's session. By that, it was a small gain, relatively speaking, in the S&P and the other markets. Russell and Dow were flat today, but it sure felt like, at least on the intraday chart, we'll jump to that quickly, sure felt like a big move to the upside where it was relentless buying pressure that took us again to a short squeezed new high. And that right there, do not adjust your screen, is 4,000 in the S&P futures. Came down from that in the after hours session, but nonetheless, S&P 4,000. Could do a headline video just off of that, but we're going to focus on earnings. The NASDAQ as well being the strongest in today's session. That was up, and that crested above the 12,600 level. But it was the Dow, again still looking at the intraday chart, which was more range bound, and we jump all the way back to the top of the perspective. On the daily chart, we still have this downtrend, the bear market, and lower lows coming into play, but we're in a scenario, we'll just go to the daily chart right here, where it's similar to what we saw at the end of March into April, which is a bear market rally taking us up to prior highs, well beyond our trend lines and moving averages. So that's a story for another day, but we're assessing the odds of additional upside action toward prior highs, and that would take us up similar to this March into April, and that would be about 4,100 if we keep getting that additional bullish, if we call it bear market rally, it is a bear market rally, but bullish action up to the prior high. So that is the framework for the daily chart. The NASDAQ has already achieved that prior high. Again, with the technology sector and the things that go into the market cap of the NASDAQ, Tesla being one of the main stocks, right there with Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, and the others, Adobe, and some of the other names you're familiar with, NVIDIA as well. But Tesla was big green on the session, and that'll transition us to talk about the earnings. So Tesla shares were up 10% today, and that had a big effect on how the NASDAQ was up so much in today's session. And that has again taken it back to the prior high. And that's not the case necessarily in the Dow mini futures or in the small cap, the Russell. But that's what we're going to be watching as we go through the remainder of July, is whether these bear market rallies take us up to prior highs and let those be targets if you're playing, or a spot to reload on the short side of the market if you're not there already. So that will be our discussion next week. But back to the stocks that had earnings in today's session. So right at the top, we'll take a look at Tesla. Now Tesla's not on this list because it reported earnings yesterday after the close. So Tesla shares remain in a relatively broad, very broad trading range. And that's about 1,200, and just make it simple, 600, which means Tesla shares fell 50% off the high and have found a support shelf at the moment in levels not seen since earlier in 2021. And just for quick reference, that's about 600 or 650. Tesla shares are trading now into 815 on their chart. But outside of Tesla, again, just to make a note, we did have earnings in Netflix, and that also achieved its upside, almost upside expected move targets, but nonetheless is getting a relatively strong bounce. And I do like to put those in context. Context just means where were other times we saw bounces of this magnitude. So that is a very big bounce. That's about a 35 or so % rally. And that's coming off, just roughly speaking, about the 160 level all the way to current into 225. That's a big move. But compare and contrast that to some prior rallies. And that was about a 31 or 40% move. And that's about January into February for that move. And we'll take one more comparison right about here, that was about a 20% move. And that was into March, into April again, when the broader market had its strong rally. Just to make a comparison, that was about here in the NASDAQ, or in the Netflix shares. And that'll be the NASDAQ right there. So outside of those two stocks, tech stocks, or at least consumer discretionary stocks, therefore Tesla, we'll call Netflix a communication or technology stock. Nonetheless, there's Netflix, counts as a communication services, but it's not as big in any way as Tesla. So again, just by the size of the box, the market cap coming back close to $1 trillion, that will have a larger effect on the NASDAQ than it will other indices, which includes the S&P. Nevertheless, back to the other stocks that had earnings. Netflix, Tesla clearly in play, but United Pacific, they had earnings as well. And all we'll look at is their respective move in today's session. These are all pre-market here on Thursday, the 21st of July. So Union Pacific continues the downtrend. AT&T was a big focal point in this morning session as we saw shares tumble 21 down to about $18.30 or $18.50 per share. And AT&T does continue its sideways trading range, not necessarily a bear market or a downtrend. And that's worth noting as a technology company or communication company. Dow Chemical did have a rally at the earlier part of 2022, and it itself is back to its lows seen at the end of last year. And then Danaher was up 9% in today's session, which did get a strong bounce off of its $240 per share level, trading now up at the top of its range into about $280. And Philip Morris also had earnings, and it is also in a sideways trading range, not of any sort of trend. Just noting the consolidation and the wide range between about 88 per share and 105 to 107. And that's just getting a simple bounce or rally. Capital One Financial just reported earnings, and after the bell, their stock continues to trade on a downtrend into its resistance point. We will have earnings in American Express, thinking outside to other financial companies. Verizon, in sympathy there with perhaps AT&T, they'll have earnings after the bell tomorrow, and NextEra Energy. And it continues a trading range as well at about 70 per share to 88. And all I'm doing there is noting the prior lows, prior highs, making the midpoint or the balance point or the fair price at that 79 per share. That is NextEra Energy. Let's take a peek at what Capital One Financial reported and how to do that quickly here in Thinkorswim. Go off to a 1-minute chart or a 5-minute chart, and we'll go into equities, take the volume off, and show the extended hours. So what did Capital One Financial do after earnings? And it has gone down. So in its trade tab, just look quickly at the expected move logic. 135% implied volatility makes a $6.40 move for the stock. So roughly speaking, is that in line with the expected move? $6 down? It is. That takes it down to about 107.50 from the close. And we will see Capital One Financial shares trade lower, assuming that they do keep that sell side activity. You'll see those shares trade down again to about 107. And that'll be a level to watch, or at least price point, by expected move logic as we start Friday's session. Earnings are still in focus, broad picture still in play, all the things being equal, bear market still continuing, downtrend still continuing, but there will be bounces, there will be volatility, and there will be counter trend bounces, or we might even call them bear market rallies. That's what's happening now in the market. Focal point again will be 4,100. If that gets above, we can have a different conversation about the strength of this rally. But until then, where we are right now, we're in a similar spot to March into April of 2022. So keep watching the earnings, keep on the calendar, always take a look at what's coming up in next week beyond earnings in play on Friday and into next week. Some of those names would be some of the highlights: General Motors, Coca-Cola, Triple M, McDonald's, Microsoft, and some others, Google. So we'll be having another conversation and trades and plays and risk protection on earnings into next week as well. As always, be careful and safe. This is Corey Rosenblum with tonight's Theo video update for July 21st, 2022.